All right, we're back. Yeah. Okay, we are reconvening now at 11:30.
Okay, we're ready to go? All right. Is it still morning? Good morning, Chair Marcus and members of the board. My name is David Hines. I'm with the National Marine Fisheries Service. And for my portion of the presentation, I will be addressing how we developed those priority reaches within each of the 4 tributaries. I know Eric touched on that a little bit. I'm also going to get into how we define the minimum subsistence flows, this pool connectivity standard, and then to talk a little bit more about why we believe the orders, if you issue them, will help us achieve that standard. And can I get the display back up, or how does that work? There we go. Okay, so starting in on the priority reaches, the map we see here shows the 4 tributary watersheds outlined in bold green, and the red streamlines are the priority reaches or the rearing reaches, which you can see in most cases do not encompass the entire watershed. And I want to draw your attention to Green Valley Creek in particular, because we'll be using examples from that watershed primarily for the remainder of my presentation anyway. And so that priority reach includes Green Valley Creek from the confluence with the Atascadero Creek up to the headwaters, and it excludes Purrington Creek, which is that one stream coming in from the south there.
Right, it's the southern one, just for those who don't remember which is which.
Okay. And so the first source of information we used in defining these priority reaches were the reaches that the broodstock program has historically stocked their juvenile fish in. And so this is a similar map, but the purple lines are showing the reaches where they've released their juvenile fish. Do I have a pointer on this, or does that work? Okay. Oh wait, I just don't want to get the supervisors in or the board members in the. Okay, there it is. So here's Green Valley Creek, and here's the reach of interest that we defined, and you can see that corresponds almost exactly with the reach that they have planted the fish in. We did exclude Purrington Creek, but and ostensibly the reason they're releasing fish there is because they believe that's where the best rearing habitat is in the summer. Uh-oh. There it goes. Okay, the other source of information we used in defining these reaches were wet-dry mapping surveys that the Department of Fish and Wildlife used. This again is Green Valley Creek. Up in the upper right-hand corner is the confluence with the Atascadero, so the priority reach begins there. And you can see this is for the summer of 2013, that there's a lot of blue line in there indicating that portions remained wetted, but of course there are also intermittent reaches and a few dry reaches as well. And you've seen this picture already, but we're looking for those reaches that would maintain water similar to what we see in the upper right-hand corner with pools and connected with riffles. Okay, so this is the beginning part of the discussion on minimum subsistence flows, and to sort of tear off what Eric was talking about with the life cycles, We're looking primarily at the juvenile rearing life stage where coho salmon reside in pools through the summer period, and they require certain water quality conditions for that rearing stage, including low water temperatures and dissolved oxygen. Local research by the captive broodstock program indicates that small amounts of surface flow can maintain sufficient water quality in pool habitats for those fish to survive. However, once the hydraulic connection between pools is lost due to lack of flow, water quality conditions deteriorate rapidly, and the next slide I will show a figure related to that, but I want to include this caveat that the flow conditions we're describing here are absolute minimum subsistence requirements, and they're not equal to what we would normally advise for summer rearing flows. Traditional summer rearing flows would include provisions for growth and maintenance of individuals and populations over time, and would be substantially greater than what we're talking about today.
Appreciate the restraint in the drought. No, seriously, I mean, it's a big part of what's both important and interesting about what's proposed here.
And you know what also I find interesting is that the finding from the research that the water quality improves, because we know we still get water quality benefits with hyporheic flows, which create, there's still connectivity between pools because of the filtration that type of functions that go on. And yet maybe this, and you know, correct me if I'm wrong, relates a little more to the residence time question and sort of the advection of waters. If you're getting a surface component, it's moving quicker, and that's lowering residence time, and it's allowing the refreshing of oxygen and that sort of thing. So it's an indicator.
Okay,
Absolutely.
smart guy, what did those words mean?
Well, you'll see. Hopefully, I'll explain that in the next slide or two. Okay, so
I just want to, you know, just because it's a pool and there's not a surface connection doesn't mean you still are getting good beneficial functions, you know.
right. But in the net result, and this is what this graph shows, is that as pools become disconnected, there's a lower probability that those water quality conditions will persist and that the fish will survive.
Yeah.
Not to say that doesn't happen in some cases, but so this is a figure I got recently from the broodstock program folks, and it's based on their data. It's an empirically based model that shows coho salmon survival as a function of the number of days or the duration after pools become disconnected. So survivorship on the y-axis, number of days after the pools become disconnected on the y-axis, and it shows clearly that once pools become disconnected, juvenile survival rates decrease, and the longer they're forced to reside in these isolated pools, the more likely they are to perish. No. This is more data from that same group showing the distribution of dissolved oxygen levels in pools. So we have survivorship again on the y-axis and dissolved oxygen on the x-axis. And you can see when dissolved oxygen levels drop below about 5 milligrams per liter, you have very poor survivorship in those pools. And as Eric said before, correlation does not equal causation, but it does suggest that asphyxiation may be a causative factor in that mortality. And again, we're looking for a trickle of flow or some degree of surface connection. The water flowing over the riffle becomes aerated and provides more dissolved oxygen to those pools. Temperature, of course, is also a consideration, especially for coho salmon. This is temperature data from the lower priority reach in Green Valley Creek from 2014 in Celsius, and I put that yellow field up there as a general indication of the temperature range at which conditions become stressful for juvenile rearing. So they do require cool water to survive, And although it's not clear that that hydraulic connectivity per se will have an effect on temperature, certainly increases in groundwater inputs to the pools will have a cooling influence on them. Okay, so the third topic I'm addressing is how and why we believe the actions you're considering today will help achieve those flow standards. And we believe that the conservation order is likely to improve flow conditions in the 4 priority streams by, as I say, allowing more groundwater seepage to contribute to stream flow, and also by limiting the surface water diversions, help maintain surface flow, or what's left of surface flow in the streams. In the next 2 slides, we're going to be looking at estimates of water demand in Green Valley Creek, and these estimates were developed by O'Connor Environmental as part of an integrated hydrologic modeling exercise they've done through some of the grant money that our agencies have provided. That 2012 number I don't think is correct. They've used a range of years, I believe from 2008 to 2014. Dr. O'Connor is in the room today, and if you have more questions on that I can't answer, he may be willing to elaborate. But let me start first with stream flow conditions. This is a hydrograph from a gauge just below the priority reach in Green Valley Creek, showing flow conditions between 2010 and 2014. You can see that the 2010 and 11 surface flows persisted through the summer months, and to some degree in 2012, although it appears to be intermittent, and certainly in 2013 and 14 appears to go dry. And keep in mind, these are observed flow conditions within the context of all the water use that's current and ongoing in the watershed. And I also want to point out that the Center for Ecosystem Management and Restoration recently reported on an assessment of their gauges in these 4 tributaries and summarized it by saying that flow conditions, I believe as of June, were 90% less than what they were seeing in the 2010 levels. So we're really looking at very low flow conditions here. So how can we keep them from drying up completely? This is the water demand estimates that I referred to by O'Connor Environmental. The top pie chart shows annual estimates of annual groundwater use in Green Valley Creek, and domestic water use accounts for 42% of the overall demand. And then the bottom figure bar graph showing domestic water demand divided into monthly periods, and you can see that the demand is greatest during the summer months.
So this is domestic. So this mirrors exactly what we've seen in urban water use in general, which means outdoor landscape watering. Because people, well, maybe they take more showers in the summer, but they don't flush more.
Right.
And I know.
And I'm not entirely clear about what the uses of that water are, and I do want to say that these results are estimates, and we're not assuming or implying that groundwater use has a direct or one-to-one connection with surface flow, but it's just to give you a general indication that there's a substantial demand for water in the summer period. Okay, so yes, by issuing a conservation order, we're hoping that that would free up some water for the creek. And it is really interesting how little water we're talking about. I mean, just a small input of water can make a big difference in some of these creeks. And that was it for me. Corinne Gray is the next unless you have more questions.
Hi, I'm Corinne Gray, or Corey, with Cal Fish and Wildlife. I'm the Region 3 Bay Delta Region Water Rights In-Stream Flow Coordinator. I'm the one-woman
The
drought
5
show right
watersheds.
now.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. One-woman drought show.
So it's been an exciting couple of months. So I just kind of carry through. I'm actually here to kind of hopefully wrap things up and also talk about the voluntary, our efforts through the voluntary drought initiative process. But first, we wanted to start, and the question that we're kind of constantly getting from people is really what are we trying to do here? What is our goal? You know, are we trying to keep conditions like we would see in 2010? No, we're not. We can't. That's just not a possibility at this point. But what we are trying to do is just keep fish alive. We're looking for fish survival, and as you've mentioned earlier, this is not something that our department is usually comfortable with doing. This is a very extreme situation. It's an emergency scenario. And at this point, our goal is to maintain survival and to prevent mortality, or as much mortality as we can this summer. You know, keep in mind, we are already seeing mortality. There are already fish dying in these streams. We are already seeing signs of drying in areas where we would not normally see that until later on in the summer. The hardest question that we've had to answer is, okay, how much water do we need to ultimately keep fish alive in the system? And that's where we kind of get at the concept of a trickle. A trickle of water in between these pools would be sufficient to maintain both temperature and dissolved oxygen. We could talk about the burbling of a brook or the trickle of water. I mean, that's effectively the sound of water being oxygenated between these pools. What we put together for you, so I thought we might be of interest, is, oops, I knew I was going to mess that up.
And that's a key point, because it's intuitive for folks. But isn't it true there's another component in the stream, the hyporheic flow, which is the underground flow in the stream? Yeah. Is a waterlogged soil condition where reduced conditions can prevail, which lowers the oxidation potential, which then removes oxygen from the water. Is that not true too? In a wetland system, that's the way it is, because you get reduced conditions in waterlogged soils. That creates anaerobic conditions. That creates denitrification and other natural processes.
I'm not entirely sure how analogous it is to the wetland, but certainly hyporheic flow, you lose the opportunity for the aeration to occur that would as it flows and riffles over the shallow habitats.
Right. So so there's a couple of processes going on above and below ground that affect
There's
oxygen.
sort of two components that have to go together. There's what we call base flow, which is really maintained in these streams by groundwater input to the streams. But groundwater input to the streams have a very low dissolved oxygen level. And so by having flow between the pools, you are re-oxygenating the water and providing habitat that's necessary for the fish.
But then the groundwater is positive in a big way because it reduces temperature.
Exactly.
It's the key component, along with riparian cover over the water, over the stream, that keeps the temperatures cool in the stream. Yeah.
And it's also, sorry Corey, but it's also, you need a certain amount of input of water to maintain pool volume.
Right.
So, you know, just the living space that is required as well.
And you need both. You can't have high temperatures and you can't have low dissolved oxygen. You know, if one of those is out of balance, then we see mortality. Now that I've forgotten which button to press. So these are maps of wet-dry conditions. In this example, it's Green Valley Creek, and surveys were done in 2012, 2013, and 2014, and it seems like we can kind of go through these, and this might be a little difficult on the screen above, but you can obviously see that even though all 3 years were considered drought years, the situation and the amount of wetted habitat in these streams has progressively gotten worse. Here's Mill Creek watershed also as an example. So one of the questions that had come up earlier was, would we normally expect to see wetted conditions in these systems? And in going out and talking to landowners, we did see on here that they had seen wetted conditions in, say, 76, 77 events. So in the past, we don't have any gauge data, but sometimes the only thing we have is the memories of the locals. But yes, we have heard that in 76, 77, we were seeing enough flow and fish surviving in these systems. So one of the things, obviously there's difficulty in determining the amount of water, the specific amount of water we need to keep these fish alive. But one of the things we did find is that we saw a significant difference in the amount of coho survival in 2013 versus 2014. This is an example where in September in 2013, or between July and September, we were seeing about 12,590 fish. Whereas in 2014, the estimate was 426 fish. Unfortunately, I do believe that in Pena Creek specifically, that after this data, that creek effectively went dry, so those 326 fish may not have survived either. In response to the drought conditions, one of the things we do recognize is that our department, in coordination with NOAA Fisheries and other partners, needs to up our monitoring efforts. And in response to that, we've been out in the field installing multiple stream gauges, temperature and dissolved oxygen loggers. I believe we even have some real-time cameras. We're also in the process of scheduling or have already gone out and done wet-dry mapping as well as presence-absence surveys for Coho. And we expect that those monitoring efforts will continue throughout the 2015 season. Hopefully not beyond. We're hoping for some rain, but ultimately we will continue to do those monitoring efforts as needed.
I have a question about the reach of interest. And maybe I misunderstood, but I think when we've seen this same slide a couple of times today, I thought that it indicated historically wetted areas, but you've got it labeled as reach of interest, and what you just said was that, you really don't know historically other than information you get from some of the old timers. So how do you determine reach of interest? Do you incorporate that with some of the information, the historical information that you have?
Well, in this particular case, I was talking about the 76, 77. I don't think we have any gauges out in these upper reaches, but for the purpose of this effort, we actually did look at wet-dry mapping from the last 3 years. And for example, and you can see in 2012, the wetted reach is pretty similar to the reach of interest in the map. And we did that for all of those watersheds. So that's actually, this was a key piece of information in developing those reaches of interest.
And are you engaging the RCDs in going out and seeing this so that they know and can answer questions that locals might have?
Yes, we've been in constant contact with the local resource conservation districts, and are you talking about outreach for their water diversions, things along that line?
Well, it could work in lots of ways. I mean, they could be, they could go out and do some of the observations that you probably don't have enough staff to do. So it's just, there are a number of things that RCDs possibly could do if there was an agreement and rule, they understood what they're looking for.
We haven't had, the resource conservation districts haven't been too active in the monitoring component. They have been really active in looking at projects and developing, recommending landowners for the voluntary drought agreement process. As for the monitoring effort, it's mostly being conducted by our staff through the fisheries program and through the habitat conservation program. We also have volunteers that we're hoping will also assist us in that, and then we're also partnering with NOAA Fisheries, and also the Coho broodstock program is out doing their own monitoring, so we're actually attempting to coordinate with them so we're not doing overlapping efforts.
Maybe I
But I think that's a good suggestion. If you're taking volunteers anyway, why not the RCD? And in those trouble spots where you can't get voluntary agreements because people don't want regulators on their property, that might be one way around it.
A good suggestion. We'll work on that. In many regards, the RCDs are aware of what's going on out there. They're not directly involved in our monitoring, but RCDs tend to put in with the landowners grant applications. So they monitor or oversee the grants, manage the grants on the ground. And so on a site-by-site basis, they're very aware of things, but they haven't, this is a new program for us. And right now we're meeting weekly to develop the protocols that we need to try to gather the data. How are we going to do that? Where are we going to do it? Again, so I think the suggestion that you have about working with them for areas that we don't have access is a good one. But at this point in time, we haven't really gotten quite that far yet.
I can add just real quick, something Eric said stimulated a thought, and that is that the RCDs are very dependent on grant funding for their activities, so they don't have a lot of free time outside of that to do stuff. So, I mean, perhaps there's an avenue where some money could be funneled that way. I know they've done monitoring in the past that was funded, and they were more than happy to do that.
So, obviously everyone's been talking about the Voluntary Drought Initiative program, and our department began our drought outreach efforts in 2014. We did have several meetings in June with the Farm Bureau, and in the fall we sent out letters to the same 650 plus landowners to letting them know that the Voluntary Drought Agreement program was available and that we were willing to talk. In 2014, we successfully came into agreement with one landowner. Unfortunately, they were not in the 4 tributaries, but we found that effort was remarkably successful. This was actually on Port Gallo, who was capable of releasing water into Porter Creek to provide sufficient flow for us to plant Coho in there, and actually they were able to survive during the winter, and then they did pulse releases this spring, and out of that we think we got around 500 smolts were able to get out of, were raised in Porter Creek, were able to leave the system, made it into the Russian River and hopefully the ocean. And that puts it into perspective when you see on the previous slide where we were talking upwards of 400 fish in the entire watershed. So we were very, very proud of that particular project. One thing of note in that situation is that there were no other diverters on that creek that we know of. There were 2 major landowners, and so all of the water that was able to be released for fish stayed in the creek for fish. And that's one of the constraints that we're dealing with right now. We are currently in the process of working with, I believe, 4 different landowners who are interested in actually releasing flows into the stream during the late fall to support existing Coho salmon. But one of the big questions that we're getting is what's to guarantee that my neighbor isn't just going to water his lawn with it. So that kind of gives you an idea of how important a larger scale effort like this is. Exactly. So in 2015, we conducted a lot more outreach, which means we have a lot smaller font. And we were able to send out letters to 650. We actually did outreach meetings. Unfortunately, I believe the amount of agency personnel, there were a 2-to-1 ratio with actual landowners. I believe we got 10 landowners in the first and then 8 in the second meeting. However, we were very grateful to those landowners who did attend, and who, a majority of whom actually did sign on to voluntary drought agreements with us. So as of this morning, we have a total of 24 voluntary drought agreements. And we also have something that hasn't been mentioned. We have 3 voluntary drought agreements for wineries who are agreeing to conduct best management practices in their winery efforts, but also let their lawns die. So, sorry, you're right. You're right. Die for the summer. How's that? And then they will be.
It just turns brown.
Oh, yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
It's brown.
It goes dormant. Who are allowing their lawns to go dormant? My apologies.
Let them go golden.
Let them go golden. Brown is the new green. What is it? Yeah.
I mean, if you drive between here and San Francisco, you see it every summer.
Yeah.
That's the way life is in.
That's what California looks like during the summer. Exactly. Yeah, it's, no, it's quite all right. I do that all the time. So, one of the things that I believe was brought up was the concept of CISA authorization. And there is the possibility with these voluntary drought agreements to provide for a memorandum of understanding and CISA authorization. In this particular case, we're only doing it as people requested, and at this point, no one has. So that's something to also keep in mind. My apologies. So, as you all know, we've all recognized that the drought was an issue, and in 2014 it became really critical for us. But prior to that, there are other programs that were developed in order to resolve the water demand issue in these tributaries. The Voluntary Drought Initiative Program obviously was developed early of last year, but we also have the Small Irrigation Registration Program, which I'm sure you're familiar with, which is a expedited permit for vineyard irrigators to develop off-stream storage up to 20 acre-feet. There's also the Emergency Tank Registration Program, which allows for an expedited permit for small domestic users to install tanks if they agree not to divert water during the midsummer. And a more recent effort is the Flow for Fish rebate program, in which Jackson Family Wineries has donated money to this program to allow small landowners to apply for money so that they can install tanks in these 4 tributaries and allow them to not divert during the summer as well. We all recognize that putting a tank in now doesn't actually seem like a really good solution because there's no water now, but we're keeping in mind that this isn't just a problem for this season. We're expecting that this issue is going to continue on in the future, and we're hoping that these programs will allow people to better plan if we have another drought year.
And these tanks can be used for all the different uses that you might, I mean, like for frost protection, for...
In theory, you could use it for frost protection, but generally that would be a very large tank. So for the purposes of vineyard irrigation and frost protection, that's where we're really mostly looking at off-stream storage in reservoirs, ideally. Let's say a 5,000 gallon tank as a goal would probably keep one house in some water for a month. But you're talking about tanks that are, for the purposes of frost protection, I just don't think it would work out too well. So that's, again, where the Small Irrigation Registration Program comes into play. If anybody has any interest in talking to us about coming into a voluntary drought agreement, this is my sales pitch, or looking at the Fish for Flow rebate program or the Small Irrigation Registration Program, these are our contact information. David, for me, for the registration program, but David has also been working on the Voluntary Drought Initiative process. Unfortunately, to date, it does not look like voluntary drought initiative program is going to be sufficient to solve the problem this summer and to keep fish alive. As we mentioned, we've gotten 24 agreements. We sent out 650 letters, and if what I heard is correct, you just sent out 10,000. So the return on that is unfortunately not exactly as we would have hoped. As such, we believe that the enhanced conservation order or the emergency regulation is an important step in maintaining surface connection between these pools and keeping these fish alive this summer. We also understand that the informational order is a critical component of that emergency regulation, and that information will allow us to make better, more reliable management decisions, not only this season, but possibly in the future. And it will also allow us to better focus our outreach efforts and our planning efforts to help people better manage their water supplies. Thank you.
Thank you all. Are there other questions we've been asking all along? Other words I don't know, Steve, that you want to throw into the mix?
Yeah, sorry about that. Actually, this
How would you know I didn't know?
Real quickly, obviously funding is going to be a big deal with all this, and you don't have to have the answer now, and I will encourage our discussion about this, but within emergency drought funding, are there avenues to help entities such as the RCDs with the outreach efforts? Because as we heard, they're limited with their funding to specific grants. And do we have some kind of process available through our Division of Financial Assistance? Because if we want to get good information, there's an argument to be made that if we make some investments, we can move this process along constructively for more sustainable water resource management. But the drought compels it. So any quick overview of
So there
funding?
are drought resources available. We'll have to see if they're available for those specific purposes, and we can follow up on that. The other thing that might help that is that I understand there's an exemption for contracts related to drought work. So that could streamline things if there is money available for those specific purposes, and we'll follow up on that.
I also want to mention that other agencies have funding available as well. The Wildlife Conservation Board has money that they're beginning to move out that's available for in-stream flows. So there are other opportunities and avenues out there.
And there's also again, this isn't for right today, unless it's already been put into the system, into the plan, but that you have integrated regional water management plans that are in Resources Agency. We're developing a stormwater program for our stormwater work. I don't think that money is going to be available till late next year, but for all kinds of interesting reasons. But there are a number of if we look kind of broader at the watershed and the watershed opportunities, I think there are funding options, again, that you might want to tie to some of these activities.
And we've been encouraging landowners to apply for funds because, for example, in the grants funds program, we can only fund projects that people apply for. And historically, we have not received many water conservation projects because many landowners are afraid of being the one landowner that gets scrutiny. So there's the possibility that with a more even playing field, more people would be willing to approach us and ask for funds for water conservation projects.
That dovetails with this effort, if this is adopted, the outreach that follows on and what resources that we can say are immediately available. Well, yes, we're working on long-term issues. The proposed regulations have very short timelines, and we need to be able to furnish options to the best of our ability.
And follow up on this discussion about funding, I think it'd be helpful to have a list available for when we have this meeting with Sonoma County and the RCDs. And then also this document on outreach, I think could probably be improved a little bit by talking with some of the, Tito Sasaki, I know is here from Farm Bureau, to kind of ground truth it and to see if it translates to what you're thinking, and then maybe also a sheet on funding opportunities that could be provided at the outreach meetings.
I'd also like to mention, I don't know if my attention lapsed and it was already stated, but there are programs in place in the Russian River. In addition to the broodstock program, there's the Russian River Coho partnership, which is a very highly organized and well-funded effort to look specifically at providing storage and forbearance programs in these areas. And I think that, and Trout Unlimited has also been involved with their own program as well. And I think there's, after 4 or 5 years, that there's still potential for people to do that. It shows me that, you know, there's more we can do to encourage people to step forward and participate in that.
All right, let's move to the public comment. I know I said we'd take a break for lunch at 12:30, but I think we should power through. I didn't know how many cards we would have. We do have 9, and we may get some more. I'm going to say 5 minutes, not 3, just because people have been sitting so long. If everything else was short, I might have gone to 3, but 5. Again, it's not the length, it's the points you want us to consider, and hopefully this discussion has been helpful to everyone, not just in the room, but listening over the web. Our first speaker is Kimberly Burr from Green Valley Creek, followed by, thank you for your communication on all of this, followed by Albert Wasicki. What? You'll tell me, okay.
Thank you. Well, I'm very happy that Green Valley Creek is on the list, and it's been a long time, and it does need some help. I'm very happy that Marquez Creek is on the list, and you know, we've been fighting on both these creeks for at least 10 years. So it's really nice that you guys are taking a serious look at them. On Dutchville Creek, they've been working a long time too, and Mill Creek. So I don't take your order, your informational order, or your enhanced conservation orders lightly on the landowners. This is going to be something for them to do. And I hope that you don't get too much resistance, because I think basic information is really what you need. I think secrecy is not cooperation. If we can't get information, we're not going to be able to cooperate. We're not going to be able to solve the problem together. I worked on Green Valley Creek for a long time, trying to restore it as a volunteer, a little tiny section. I also work with the North Coast Stream Flow Coalition. Coastal streams all in danger of losing their fish runs, and many of them already have. So I'm here to urge you to go full speed ahead, to expand the scope of your order, if not today, very soon. This is you know, a big start, but I think that we really have to look at this, because we have marine life and terrestrial life that depend on these fish runs. This is not something that is happening to landowners overnight. They have recovery plans. I think Director Larson said, or Mr. Larson said, that recovery plans have been on the books for many, many, many years. 90s, salmon were functionally extinct. So this is not happening swiftly. It's not happening swiftly enough. And you guys have been extremely patient and polite and cooperative. And these staff people, they have an incredibly hard job. It's not that they haven't been sounding the alarm bell. So I think you need to listen to them. So the low-hanging fruit is the information. I think other low-hanging fruit is having drip irrigation. We're not asking anybody to put in drip irrigation. A lot of people still don't have it. That's very low-hanging fruit. I'm glad that you have the hydrologic connectivity information requirement. I think that's vital and will really be helpful in the future. So, oh yeah, and while you guys were struggling with this and grappling with this and doing your public outreach, development is still going on. This, you know, like, I just don't want you to be fooled of thinking that there's, you know, everybody's now happy to come together and work together. This is a pattern. Every time there's an emergency, landowners rush to get together, and why not 10 years ago? So I really don't want any further delays. Personally, I'd rather see you guys move forward today and think about maybe going further. There's a project in our neighborhood in Laguna, and that's estimated to need 1 billion gallons of water annually. It's going through the permit process. That's a big winery, distillery, event center. I have been begging with the County of Sonoma for the last couple months with a delegation of water and fish people to, when they're going through their well ordinance update. We've met with many of the supervisors. Supervisor Gore declined to meet with us. We wanted them to at least have some minimal analysis of new wells, the potential impacts of new wells. Flatly refused to do that. That doesn't seem very reasonable to me. So that well ordinance will probably be passed. It'll be ministerial. There'll be no analysis of impacts, no matter where they are. There's a minimal 30-foot setback so that the what do you call, well drilling rig can get in there and put the well in, but they're not analyzing any impacts on the creeks. I think I'm almost done. I would like to see the coastal streams put in high priority category. And the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act only has a couple of medium priority areas identified in Sonoma County, and I think they're overlooking the really severe impacts they're having on our coastal streams. I'd like to see that put into the Groundwater Act as higher priority. Anyway, thank you very, very much. I did submit written comments and a study. I think the study might sort of inform this process a little bit too, and thank you all to the agency people. This is a politically hot thing, and I think that's why you guys are so important, because the political influence in some of these counties is so strong. Even agency people have a hard time making progress, so you guys are critically important in this, you know, moving the ball forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Chucky, just tell me how to pronounce it, I'm sorry, followed by Ann Maurice.
Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, everybody. I love fish. I love salmon. I'm really for them. I'm totally opposed to you folks.
Just in
I get a
general?
letter on the 12th of the month, and then the 15th of the month they close their doors on any comments, and then you have your meeting here on the 17th. I didn't even read my letter till the 15th, and by that time everything was closed because my weekend was filled up with art at the source. I had too many other things to do to read the letter. And about those 10,000 letters, that's the biggest pile of cow manure I've heard in a long time. We only have about 500 people in our area. My property is right behind the guy who owns Dutch Bill Creek, the headlands of Dutch Bill Creek, and he didn't get a letter. Yeah, the guy who owns the headlands of Dutch Bill Creek did not get a letter. So you guys didn't send out 10,000. If you sent out 10,000, where'd you send them? Ukiah? West Santa Rosa? You didn't send them to our area. Now, let's take a look at what's been going on. a real close look. Over the years, if you take a look at a graph, water has been going down steadily as grapes have been coming in increasingly, as the grape growers have been sucking the water out of our aquifers at a really high rate. But do you talk to them? No, you turn a blind eye. I have 300 apple trees. I dry farm those apple trees. And when one dies, I plant a new one. And it's dry farmed. And for those who don't understand that, if the rain doesn't make it grow, it dies. I do not go out there and drip on it. And that's what grapes can do. It's a Mediterranean plant that can be dry farmed. It does not need 100,000 gallons for every 5 acres. And I do not understand why, if you folks really want us to solve problems, that you cannot bring us together to solve those problems. We're a community. My degree was in math. I solve problems. I'm happy to go to one of your meetings and solve problems, but I don't get any information. The only letter I've ever received from you folks is the one I received last Saturday. And you folks are the ones who are trying to tell us what we're supposed to do and then telling them to regulate us. How can we be this is not a fascist country. This is America. We work together. You understand how that works? You guys are really young. I'm 68 years old. You guys haven't been around a while. You guys, some of you have. Yeah.
71.
And you're looking great. And my proposal to you five is that you do not vote on this thing today. That you allow us to have those meetings. That you allow us to find ways to solve this. The ways that we can use gray water. Ways that we can use other methods to solve the problems that we have. Because I know we can help these fish out. Because we want to. But not by stomping on the little guy. When you look askance at the man who is sucking the water out of every aquifer around me. I've lost 20 feet in my well in the last 7 years since the vineyards have been put in east of me. I had no problems when there were just apple trees next to me. But as soon as the vineyards came in, I lost all my well. And pretty soon they may be gone. But do they care? I hope you folks do.
Thank you, sir. I think we'll be catching up on the information. I understand you're angry about a lot of things. I recognize that the groundwater management is going to take a while to catch up, but I think the intention of everyone here is to figure out how to make it work together. And this information and conservation order will apply equally to residents and to vineyards, and then eventually there may well be curtailments, but there's time in those meetings, I think, to come up with things if people are really interested in contributing, because what's being asked is... Yeah, yeah. Recognize. It's a challenge. Don't do the those people thing. Those are very good people working their hearts out to try and do things with very limited resources. People have tried to have meetings. I'm not going to have an argument with you. I'm just saying I understand that you're angry. You use your time to be angry, but honestly, there you go.
The document in the back of the room that has stakeholder meetings that are coming up, so hopefully you can